You hear that roar, see that flash of red. I mean, there's really nothing quite like it, the prancing horse. It's instantly recognizable, isn't it?
Absolutely. Globally known.
Exactly. And today, we're doing a deep dive into that whole world, Ferrari. Not just the amazing cars, but the man behind it all, the racing obsession, and, well, the whole business empire. It's quite a story.
It really is. And to do it justice, we've dug pretty deep. We're looking at historical documents, lots of biographical stuff on Enzo Ferrari himself, but also, the hard numbers, financial reports, detailed race analyses, even studies on their brand strategy.
So a bit of everything, then.
Pretty much. The idea, our mission here, is to pull out the really surprising bits, the key things you need to know to understand how this legend was built, where it stands today, and maybe where it's heading. It's like your fast track to being genuinely clued in on Ferrari.
Okay, great. So where better to start than with the man himself, Enzo Ferrari. His passion kicked off super young, didn't it? Like 10 years old.
Yeah, that's the story. 1908 sees Felice Nazzaro win at the Circuito di Bologna, and apparently that was it. Spark ignited.
Incredible. But his early life wasn't easy. There was a lot of tragedy there, especially around World War I.
Oh, absolutely. Huge tragedy. In 1916, during the war, he lost both his father and his older brother to the Italian flu epidemic. Enzo himself served, got really sick in the 1918 pandemic too, actually had to leave the army because of it.
Wow. So that must have shaped him quite a bit.
You've got to think so. That kind of loss, that kind of experience, it builds a certain resilience, a drive, definitely.
So given all that, how did he actually break into the car world? It sounds like the odds were stacked against him.
They really were. His family business basically collapsed after the war. He apparently tried to get a job at Fiat in Turin. Can you imagine?
Fiat? Seriously?
Yeah, didn't happen. Unsuccessful. But then he landed a job as a TIS driver at CMN. They were a smaller outfit in Milan, converting old trucks into passenger cars, that sort of thing.
Okay, so a foot in the door at least.
Exactly. And he quickly got into racing. His competitive debut was in 1919, the Parma Poggio di Briceto Hill Climb. Finished fourth. Not too shabby for a first outing.
Not bad at all. And then came Alfa Romeo. That was a huge part of his career, right? 20 years.
A massive part. He started as a driver for them, but then, worked his way up, eventually became director of their whole racing department. He even got his first Grand Prix win with them, Savio Circuit, 1923.
And that win, that connects to the famous logo, the prancing horse.
It does. It's a great story, actually. After that win, he met Count and Countess Baracca. Their son, Francesco Baracca, was this famous World War I flying ace who had the horse painted on his plane.
Ah, okay.
And they basically said, Enzo, put our son's prancing horse on your cars. It'll bring you good luck.
And he did. Wow. Talk about brand origins.
Right. Talk about embedding heroism and, national pride right into the brand DNA from day one. It wasn't just a logo. It was a story.
Yeah, so that ambition clearly grew. He didn't just want to drive or manage for Alfa. Tell us about Scuderia Ferrari.
Well, in 1929, he founded Scuderia Ferrari. Now, initially, it was more like a society, a club for amateur racers, helping out the gentleman drivers.
Right.
But it transformed really quickly. It essentially became Alfa Romeo's official racing arm. Shows you how much influence Enzo was already building.
But then he stopped driving himself. That seems like a big step for someone so passionate about racing.
It was huge. 1932, his son, Alfredo, they called him Dino, was born. And Enzo decided, right, that's it for driving. He wanted to focus purely on managing the Alfa race cars, building the team.
So assembling the talent, like Tazio Nuvolari.
Exactly. He brought in superstars like Nuvolari. It tells you Enzo saw the bigger picture, He realized his real strength, his ultimate contribution, wasn't necessarily behind the wheel anymore. It was in building the winning machine, the whole operation. It was about the team, the legacy.
That focus, that ambition, eventually led him to break away from Alfa Romeo entirely, right?
Right.
In 1939,
Oh.
just before the war really kicked off.
Yeah, a strategic split.
Right.
But there was a non-compete clause. He couldn't use the Ferrari name for 4 years. Ah, okay. So what did he do?
He was clever. Founded Autoavio Costruzioni instead. They even built a car, the 815. But then, boom, World War II.
Right.
Everything changed.
Right, production shifted.
Massively.
Yeah.
They had to pivot to making military hardware, grinding machines, apparently quite lucrative contracts too.
Right.
Survival mode, essentially.
And his wartime experience itself was complicated.
Yeah.
Dealing with different factions.
Very complex. He had this strained relationship with the Germans who weren't happy about him making their machines, apparently without permission. And then the Italian resistance, well, they were suspicious of his connections to the fascist regime.
So caught in the middle.
Pretty much. He
Right.
even had to pay a huge ransom, like 500,000 lira, to appease the resistance at one point. And on top of all that, his plant in Maranello got bombed by the Allies
Wow.
twice, November 44, then again in February 45.
Man. So, beyond all the professional turmoil, the war, there was immense personal heartbreak later on, wasn't there? The death of his son, Dino.
Yeah, that was profound. Dino died in 1956. He was only 24. Muscular dystrophy.
Oh, terrible. And by all accounts, it changed Enzo fundamentally. People who knew him said he became much more withdrawn, quite somber. Some even used the word dictatorial.
Really?
Yeah. That's when he started wearing those trademark dark sunglasses all the time, like a shield maybe. And famously, after Dino died, he never set foot at another race.
Ever. Wow, that speaks volumes.
It really does. Just shows the depth of that grief.
Enzo himself passed away in 1988.
Hmm.
But his legacy, I mean, it's huge. It's fitting, I suppose, that the F40, maybe one of the most iconic Ferraris ever, was the last car he personally signed off on.
A perfect bookend, isn't it? And the legend just kept growing. Get this, in 2017, police busted a gang, and part of their plan, believe it or not, was to kidnap Enzo's body from the cemetery in Modena.
You're kidding. To hold it for ransom?
Yeah, millions of euros. Luckily, they got caught before they could do it. But it just shows you, I mean, nearly 30 years after his death, he was still this larger-than-life figure, still worth millions, even in death.
That is absolutely wild. Okay, so from the man to the machines. After the war, Ferrari, the car company, really takes shape. Ferrari SPA is official. And the flume car rolls out in 47, the 125S. Built to race, right?
Absolutely. Purpose-built for the track. And a key thing here, something Enzo was almost fixated on, was the V12 engine.
V12, yeah, that's synonymous with Ferrari.
Totally. He believed really strongly that the V12 was the perfect design. Adaptable for sports cars, adaptable for Grand Prix cars, minimal changes needed. He even talked about the sound of the V12, called it the Italian interpretation of refined engineering. He'd been obsessed with V12 since like 1925, even when rivals thought it was a bit nuts.
So that V12 obsession drove their early road cars too. How did they approach selling cars to the public, moving from just racing?
Well, they started thinking about road cars pretty early on. The America series kicked off in 1950. That was aimed squarely at the U.S. market, hence the name, with big engines to appeal to American tastes.
Makes sense.
Then came the 250 series, starting around 53. That was huge. That's really where Ferrari transitioned from making these one-off hand-built specials to, well, series production. The 250 GT Coupe in 58 was basically their first proper series-produced road car, a massive step for the company.
Okay, and then the 60s and 70s saw some big shifts in design engineering,
Yeah.
like the Dino, named after his son, obviously. But what was its significance beyond that?
The Dino was a really interesting move. First, it was Ferrari's first sort of mass-produced mid-engine street car. That was a departure. And second, critically, it didn't have a V12. It had a V6.
A V6 Ferrari.
Yeah. It was a way to perhaps broaden the appeal, maybe test the waters with different layouts and engines. It definitely influenced what came later. It was kind of an experiment, but a really important one.
And that mid-engine layout continued with the Berlinetta Boxer in 73, flat 12 this time though, and then its successor, the Testarossa. Wow. 1984. That car was the 80s, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Especially with Miami Vice. Instant icon status.
Yeah.
And fast. It was the world's fastest production car when it launched, 180 miles per hour.
It's just incredible. And it cemented that sort of aspirational high-speed image.
Totally. But they were innovating elsewhere, too. The 308 GT4 back in 73, that was actually their first road car with a V8. Another departure from the V12 norm.
Right. And didn't they do an automatic transmission around then, too? Seems unlikely for Ferrari.
They did. The 400 GT from 1976. First Ferrari you could get with an automatic. It was a 3-speed GM turbohydromatic unit, believe it or not. Made it a bit more accessible, I guess, to a wider audience who maybe didn't want the manual gearbox hassle.
Fast forward to today, or very recently anyway.
Yeah.
The Puro Sang, Ferrari's first. Well, they don't call it an SUV, do they? But it's their first four-door higher-riding vehicle, launched September 22.
Yeah, they're careful with the wording. But look, it's tapping into that huge market. What's interesting, though, is how they're managing it. They're capping shipments. Only 20% of their total production volume can be Purosangs.
Maintaining exclusivity, even with a potentially high-volume model. Smart.
Yeah. Very deliberate. And this fits into their whole future strategy, which is fascinating. Electrification. They've got a super aggressive roadmap.
Really? Ferrari and electric.
Oh, yeah. By the end of 2026, the plan is 60% electrified, that's full electric and hybrid, and only 40% pure internal combustion engines, ICE.
60% by 2026. That's soon.
It is, and by 2030, the target shifts again. 20% ICE, 40% hybrid, and 40% fully electric.
Wow. 40% full electric by 2030.
Exactly. They've just inaugurated a new e-building and an e-cells lab to boost their battery tech knowledge. It raises huge questions, though, doesn't it? How does a brand built on the V12 roar, that visceral feel, transition to electric without losing its soul?
That's the billion-dollar question, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears again. Back to the heart of Ferrari, really. Racing. The race for glory.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, Ferrari was always about racing, wasn't it? Road cars were just a way to pay for it.
That was Enzo's philosophy, absolutely.
Yeah.
Scuderia Ferrari, based in Maranello since '43, racing was everything. And their Formula One record, I mean, it's just unparalleled.
The oldest team, right? Competed in every championship.
Every single one since the championship started in 1950. Oldest surviving, most successful. First F1 win in '51, first World Championship in '52. They hit the ground running.
But success like that breeds rivalry. And internal friction, too, I imagine. Didn't Maserati set up shop practically next door and even steal their star driver early on?
Huh. Yeah, Maserati in Modena, right nearby. And they did poach Tazio Nuvolari back in the '30s. That rivalry was intense, but the internal stuff could be just as dramatic.
Like the Palace Revolt?
Oh yeah, 1961, October. 8 top guys engineers like Carlo Cicchi and Giotto Bizzarini, really key people, basically walked out. They were unhappy about Enzo's wife Laura getting too involved in the company.
So what happened?
Enzo fired them all, just like that. Some of them went off and formed a rival company, ATS. Imagine losing that much top talent in one go. A real crisis.
Wow. And then, probably the most famous rivalry, Ford versus Ferrari. That all started because Ford tried to buy them.
That's exactly. 1963, Ford wants to buy Ferrari, deal's almost done. But Enzo digs his heels in. He absolutely refused to give up control of the racing team. That had to remain 100% under his command.
And Henry Ford II didn't take that well.
Not well at all. He was furious. Basically vowed, okay, if we can't buy him, we'll beat him. Specifically, beat them at Le Mans.
Hence the GT40.
Hence the GT40. Ford poured insane amounts of money into that project. And yeah, they eventually won Le Mans in '66, breaking Ferrari's dominance. But Ferrari still won in '64 and '65 during that battle.
So it wasn't an immediate Ford victory.
No. But eventually, Ferrari kind of shifted focus. By '73, partly due to Fiat's influence, Fiat had bought a stake in Ferrari. By then, they pulled out of sports car racing. Decided to put all their resources into Formula One. More commercial value, they figured.
Okay, so back to F1. What are some of the standout moments, the highs and lows that really define their F1 story?
Oh, there are so many. You've got periods of just utter dominance, like the Sharknose 156 car in 1961. Incredible season. They finished 1, 2, 3, 4 at the Belgian Grand Prix that year. Just amazing.
1, 2, 3, 4. Wow.
Then you have the Niki Lauda era in the mid-'70s. 2 drivers' titles for Lauda, 75, 77. 3 constructors' titles in a row for the team. A real resurgence.
And wasn't there a really poignant win right after Enzo died?
Unbelievably poignant. The 1988 Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Just weeks after Enzo passed away, nobody expected it. McLaren had been dominant all year, but somehow Ferrari finishes 1-2. Gerhard Berger, Michele Alboreto, the crowd went insane. It felt like, I don't know, a tribute from beyond.
What a moment. And they had a long championship drought after that, didn't they?
They did. 15 seasons without a constructor's title. That finally ended at the Japanese Grand Prix in 1999. Huge relief for the Tifosi.
And then came Schumacher.
And then came Schumacher. Michael Schumacher. Just unprecedented dominance. 2000 to 2004, 5 drivers' titles in a row for Michael. And the team won the constructor's title every year from 1999 through 2004. 6 straight years. A true golden era.
Unbelievable run. More recently. Any highlights?
Well, 2022 Bahrain Grand Prix felt like a fresh start. New regulations, the ground effect cars. Charles Leclerc took pole and won. Big moment. And the 2024 car, the SF24, has been called their best since maybe 2018. 5 wins, scoring really well. They actually hit 10,000 total points as an F1 constructor this year.
10,000 points. That's incredible. And the driver lineup for 2025 is massive news too, right?
Oh, yeah. keeping Charles Leclerc, but bringing in Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, joining Ferrari. That's going to be fascinating to watch.
Absolutely. But it's not only F1, is it? They have Le Mans history, too.
They do. 9 outright wins at the 24 Hours of Le Mans over the years. And they just made a big return to the top class of endurance racing in 2023 with the 499p hypercar.
And they won.
They won Le Mans in 23 on their return. And then they won it again in 2024. Back-to-back victories. That's a huge statement, committing to both F1 and top-level sports cars again.
So wrapping up the racing, 16 Constructors' Championships, 15 Drivers' Championships in F1 alone, countless records. It's just staggering.
The legacy is immense. But let's zoom out again. Ferrari as a business. Because it's not just a racing team or a car maker, it's this global brand phenomenon.
And the numbers back that up, right? 2024 results look pretty spectacular.
They really do. Net revenues hit nearly 6.7 billion euros, up almost 12%. Operating profit, EBIT, over 1.8 billion euros, up almost 17%. Net profit, 1.5 billion euros. These are huge figures.
Especially when you consider how few cars they actually sell compared to, say, mainstream manufacturers. What's the secret? The CEO, Benedetto Vigna, said something interesting.
He did. He summed it up as quality of revenues over volumes. That's their mantra. It's driven by, he says, a strong product mix, meaning selling more of the expensive, higher-margin models and huge demand for personalizations, people spending fortunes customizing their Ferraris.
So even though total shipments were only up slightly, like 0.7% to just under 14,000 cars?
The money they make per car is massive. And that comes back to brand power. Think about it. March 2020, Ferrari's market value was around $30 billion. That was more than GM or Ford at the time.
Despite selling, 10,000 cars a year versus GM's 8 million.
Exactly. It's insane. Brand finance consistently calls Ferrari the most powerful brand in the world. It all comes down to that exclusivity, that desirability.
And they cultivate that exclusivity very carefully, don't they? The production limits, the waiting lists.
Oh, yeah. They used to have that hard cap, 7,000 cars a year. They've used it a bit, maybe 10,000 to 13,000 now. But still, waiting lists can be 4 or 5 years long for some models, especially if you want heavy customization.
And they actually turn people away sometimes, even rich collectors.
Famously, there was the case of Preston Henn, a huge collector, who they wouldn't sell one of the limited edition LaFerrari Apertas to. They are very selective about who gets their most special cars. It's all part of maintaining the mystique.
But they also diversify the brand.
Yeah.
Right? Merchandise, theme parks. Isn't there a risk of diluting that precious exclusivity?
There absolutely is, and Ferrari knows it. You see the logo on everything, from coffee mugs and watches to Acer laptops and even mahjong sets at one point, and Ferrari World Abu Dhabi, the theme park.
Right. So how do they manage that risk?
They've actually become much stricter recently. They realized they might have overdone it. So they've actively cut back, slashed licensing partnerships by 50%, reduced the number of product categories by about 30%, trying to focus on higher-end stuff like the partnership they have with Giorgio Armani for clothing. It's a constant tightrope walk.
And on the racing side, they're building some big strategic partnerships too, not just drivers.
Definitely. IBM's coming on board as a premium partner for the F1 team starting 2025. They've got a deal to supply power units and gearboxes to Andretti if Andretti gets their F1 entry approved for 2026. That's a big technical partnership.
And the HP deal.
Yeah, huge multi-year title partnership with HP Inc. That started in 2024. That's why the team is now officially Scuderia Ferrari HP. These are major corporate deals bringing in significant money and tech collaboration.
So looking ahead to 2025, what's the general feeling from the company? More growth.
The guidance is pretty bullish. They expect robust growth. They're counting on that positive product mix continuing. More income from the racing side, better F1 ranking means more prize money, plus sponsorships like HP and IBM kicking in, and they're also looking to expand their lifestyle activities. Plus, ongoing investment in the brand and digital stuff seems like they're firing on all cylinders. Pardon the pun.
Huh. Okay, so when you boil it all down, Ferrari is just this incredible mix, isn't it? Born from one man's absolute passion, shaped by fierce rivalries, constantly innovating on the track and with the road cars, and somehow maintaining this almost mythical brand power. It really is more than just cars.
It's a cultural force, which brings us to maybe a final thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on. We're heading into this future that's increasingly electric, maybe even involves shared mobility. How does Ferrari do it? How do they balance that incredible legacy, the V12 sound, the raw performance, that extreme exclusivity with where the world is going? How do they change without losing the very essence of what makes people desire a Ferrari so much in the first place?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Fascinating stuff.